Hello and welcome. Today we're going to do a class that is all about hips. So, to start off with, your hip joints. They should be able to do a bunch of movements. One is flexion like this and extension like this, bringing the leg back. Another set of movements is abduction, taking the leg out away from center, and adduction, bringing it closer to the center, and also rotation. So, should be able to internally rotate the leg and externally rotating the leg. And all of this is movements of the upper leg bone, your femur, moving in the hip socket. So, very often, our hips can get stiff and sore and lose some mobility in some of those directions. So, this class is intended to give you some nice stretches and exercises to help bring back some of that mobility and get rid of some of that stiffness and pain. It can affect the hips. You might feel pain in your low back because of some of these issues. So, we'll try a few things today to hopefully help with those issues. And we're going to use a couple of props, yoga props. And the first is a yoga strap. And you can use a yoga strap if you got it, but it's perfectly fine to use something like a scarf or even a belt to substitute for this. What you want is something that's long enough that if you wrap the strap or the belt or the scarf around your foot, you can have your leg in this kind of a position and have enough strap that you can hold on without needing to round your back to hold on to the strap. Okay, so that's one thing. The next thing is a yoga block. And again, if you don't have that one, that's fine. A nice alternative is to use a blanket or a towel and roll it up. So if you make a nice tight roll in your blanket or towel, what we want is something that comes to the same kind of level as a typical yoga block. What we're going to do with this, partly, is to put part of our body weight on top of the block or the blanket. So you want to roll it tightly enough that when you lay on top of it, it's not going to completely flatten. You want it to hold a bit of its shape, so it's something like the block. All right, so we'll use the block and strap to start off with. I'm just going to toss this off to the side. So grab your strap or whatever substitute you've got, your block or your rolled up blanket, and we'll start off on our back on the ground. All right, so grab your block or your rolled blanket and bring it between your legs, just kind of at the level of your knees and a little bit below. And then the strap or whatever you've got that's strap like, we're going to have a loop in it. If you've got a belt, you can wrap it around your legs and find the best way to fasten it so that it is surrounding your legs and the block. If you've got a scarf, you can just tie a nice knot so that it's holding all of this in place. So, this is our setup here. And we're going to do some action with that in a few moments. But first, we're just going to settle in and start off with some gentle breathing. So just take a moment here once you've got everything together and just begin to bring your attention right here to this moment. Notice how you feel. Notice if you need to make any adjustments to feel more comfortable. So it might be nice if you feel uncomfortable in your neck to have some little blanket or pillow underneath the back of your head. So if you need that, take a moment to grab it. What we want is to feel fairly comfortable here so that you can connect to the present moment without being distracted by body aches or discomfort. And when you're ready, just bring your attention to your body. Notice all of the parts of the back of your body that are touching the ground. And now begin to notice your breath. Just breathing naturally. Don't need to change it in any way. Just observe the breath. Notice all the little movements that come along with breath. You might feel a gentle expansion as you inhale, your chest and belly filling. And as you exhale, everything settles back down towards the ground again. And just for a few moments, just be with that rhythm. Just notice all those little movements. And then bring your hands to your chest. You can have your hands on the front of your chest. I like to have my hands on the sides of the ribs as well. So, whatever works, whatever's more comfortable for you. And as you breathe, just feel your rib cage move. And now with a little bit more intention. As you breathe in, deliberately feel like you're filling your rib cage. Front, sides, maybe even the back a little bit. And bring your hands to your belly. Same thing here. Just notice to start off with. Do you feel that gentle rise and fall of your belly as you breathe? And then with a little more intention, imagine you can draw your inhales all the way down to your low belly. And we'll take a couple more breaths just like this. Allow your exhales to be long and slow, but stay in a range where your breath feels easeful. So if it feels like you're really pushing and straining to follow these instructions to breathe down to your belly, then just ease off a little bit. All right, and let that go. So we're going to start doing some movement of the hips and the legs. So first thing, bring your hands to your hip creases. And then just lift one foot off of the ground just a tiny little bit. And you should be able to feel the muscles in your hip joint, or in the hip crease rather, start to pop up. Those are your hip flexors, the muscles that do that action of flexing the hip. And all I want you to do right now is just identify where those muscles are, where you feel them, and keep your hands there. So each side, lift and lower a couple of times. Find where you feel those muscles. And then bring your feet back down to the ground, but keep your hands on your hip creases where you found those muscles. And now we're going to do some different movements and try to do them without those hip flexors needing to do any work. So the first action is to press your legs in towards the block. It's a small, simple movement. But what you want to do is press your legs in without the hip flexors needing to fire. So if you press in towards the center and the hip flexors start to harden up, then just make that movement even smaller. Even if it's just a whisper of pressing in towards the center, find that action without your hip flexors needing to do that job. and it's subtle. It's subtle and it asks you to pay attention, really notice what's going on. And with your hands here and your hip creases, you might notice your hip bones in general or your pelvis in general. Does it shift around? Does it move when you try to do that action? Does your back move when you try and do that action? If any of that is going on, make the movements smaller, make them more gentle. Try to find a way that it is just your feeling like your leg bones are squeezing in towards the block and letting go. None of your other bones need to move, but they might be in the habit of doing that as a way of compensating for other muscles that might not be online as much. So, this is an action of coordination, trying to get our brain and these muscles on the inside of the thighs to talk to each other to do this action. Okay, let that go. Have just a little bit of a wiggle, settle back in. We'll try the next movement now. Same setup, find those hip flexors, keep your hands there. And this time, instead of pressing in towards the block, we're going to press out into the strap or the belt. Same thing. Is something else working or shifting that doesn't need to for this action? Hip flexors should stay quiet. The bones of your pelvis should stay quiet and still. Your back should stay nice and relaxed. And if it's not doing that, then again, make the movement smaller, make it more gentle. And through all of this, notice your breathing. If you're doing these movements, concentrating to find these little subtleties and you're holding your breath, just pay attention to that. Notice, take a break, bring back your breath, and do all of this as you breathe easy. Try not to hold your breath. So I'm giving you a gazillion little clues to try to pay attention to. So just be gentle with yourself. Try not to worry about it too much. Just think about it as experimenting, just playing with these subtle little movements. Okay, and let's let that go. Again, just have a little wiggle, have maybe a little stretch, and then come back to stillness. Just return to your breath. No action necessary. Just notice your breath as it is right now. Okay, let's try out a different movement. So we'll take the block and the strap away. Just bring your knees in so that you can undo the strap whatever way you need to. Set it off to the side. The block will go off to the side too. But we're going to use both of them again in a moment. So don't send them too far away. Take a breath here. And gather your knees in towards your chest. Hold on with your hands, or if that's not comfortable for you, strap can be really great to hold onto your legs for you so that your shoulders aren't holding any strain, your back doesn't need to strain. So, holding on with hands or the strap, just give yourself a hug and then have a bit of a rock from side to side, like giving your back a little bit of a massage. And when you come back to center this time, hold on to just one leg and stretch the other one long on the ground. Just try to let back of your heel rest on the ground. And just breathe here. Just getting a little bit of a stretch for the front of the thigh. And let's switch sides. Bring the other knee in. Straighten the opposite leg. Take a few breaths here. Okay, and then bring the other knee back in. So you're holding on to both of your legs. This time, bring your hands right onto your knees. Bring your big toes to touch each other. And then bring your knees out to the sides. And we're going to do some circles here. Just circle your knees away from each other, out, away from your belly, and back together, and back in. Try that a few times. See if you can let your big toes stay together the whole time. So this is nice, just warming up the hip joints. You can let your back kind of rock a little bit down towards the ground and back up as you go. All right, and let that go. All right, grab your strap again. And this time we're going to bring one knee in and wrap that strap around the bottom of your foot. Then we're going to straighten the leg and hold the strap so that ideally your shoulders and your elbows can be on the ground. I want everything else to be nice and relaxed. We're just going to give this leg a little bit of attention. So your leg doesn't have to be as high up as mine is. If it's more comfortable to be down here, that's perfectly fine. Just use the strap for some support wherever you are and take breaks whenever you need. To start off with, we're just going to do a hamstring stretch, these muscles on the back of the thigh. So, wherever your leg is in space here, flex your foot so that your toes are pulling up towards your nose. Soften your knee a little bit though. It doesn't have to be as straight as possible. Have just a little micro bend in the knee. And as you're pulling your toes up towards your nose, try to press out through your heel at the same time. Find a place where you get a bit of stretch on the back line of your leg and just breathe with it. And then soften your leg, maybe give it a little bit of a wiggle. Okay. And now hold the strap with just one hand. Same hand as leg. The other hand, bring it onto your hip bones. And now we're going to do some rotation. So think about moving your upper leg bone in your hip socket. Just picture that as you go. We'll do some internal rotation, just rolling the whole leg in, and then external, rolling the whole leg out. Try to think of it not necessarily coming from your foot or your lower leg, but that upper leg. And just see how much rotation have you got there. Now, the other hand on your hip bones can give you some feedback. When you do this, if you notice your whole pelvis wanting to shift side to side or lift up, or if you notice your back moving, then again, make this movement smaller. It's about getting curious about how much rotation you actually have available at your hip joint. It's not about doing the biggest rotation ever because then other structures might be compensating to try to find more movement. Just dial it back, see what is actually here at this joint. It's okay if it's not much. It's just what we're checking out right now. And as you practice these little subtle movements, you might find that over time you can increase your range of motion. It's another exercise of coordinating brain, to these muscles, these structures down here. So let's switch sides when you're ready. Start off with our hamstring stretch to begin with. So toes pulled towards your nose, heel reaching out. Feel as if you can make the back line of your leg a little bit longer. And breathe. Remember, keep just a micro bend at your knee. If it feels like you can't straighten your knee, if you're more like here, bring the leg down a little bit more. Just don't be afraid to make any adjustments you need to find a position that's okay for you. Okay, and let's try our rotations on this side. So one hand on hip bones, one hand holding the strap. Think about moving from your upper leg bone as you rotate. Let, let your back stay still too. Notice if you're tensing anywhere else. Maybe you're squeezing your shoulders a little bit, maybe you're clenching through your jaw. It's funny where the body will give you some signals that are far away from what you're actually trying to do. So just notice, soften, put all your focus on this one subtle little movement. And then we'll let this one go. Move the strap off to the side. Maybe you'd like to bring your knees in towards your chest and have another little rock. Maybe you'd like to have a nice big stretch. Whatever comes naturally to you here. All right. And now let's try a bridge pose. So, feet on the floor, knees bent. Walk your feet a little bit closer towards your seat. Doesn't have to be right as close as you can go, a little bit closer. And try to make your thighs kind of about hip width distance apart. So we're not right in towards the center, we're not a little bit farther out to the side. Just kind of trying to line them up with our hips. Let your arms rest by your sides. And now press your feet down into the ground. And without actually moving your thighs, try to squeeze them in towards the center as if you were trying to hold that block in place, like we had at the beginning of the class. Keep all that action in your legs and lift your hips up off of the ground. Nice. And you don't need to go as high as you can. It's not about stretching your back right now. It's about getting some hip extension, coming from this flexed position to a more extended position. So you're using these muscles on the back of the pelvis to find that action. So you can do up and down a couple of times. You can come up and hold it for a few breaths if you like. It's up to you. Just kind of explore this movement. And then come on back down. Nice. Now grab your block. We're going to do a stretch for our hip flexors, creating more extension at the hip. So, block or rolled up blanket, whatever you've got. Come up into bridge pose again, and this time bring that block or blanket under the back of your pelvis. So we don't want it under the low back. We don't want it way down here towards tailbone. You want to feel steady here so that your block is holding your pelvis in place. So if you lift one or both feet off the ground, you should feel supported here. It shouldn't feel uncomfortable. So make whatever adjustments you need to find that position. And then bring one knee into your chest, holding with hands or hands and strap, whatever is more comfortable for you. And then straighten the other leg. Bring your heel right down to the ground. So now we're getting a nice stretch for these muscles on the front of the thigh, on the front of the hip. And just be here for a few breaths. I love this stretch. It's like the opposite of sitting, where we have the hip flexed all the time when we're sitting. This is adding a little bit of extra extension. Great. We'll let this one go when you're ready. Slide this foot back in, release the other leg, and we'll pick up the opposite leg, stretch the other one long. Find this setup. Take a few breaths here. And when you are ready, slowly come back out of this position. And we're going to lift up into our bridge pose to take the block away. So bring your feet again a little bit closer so you feel steady. To press your feet into the ground, lift your hips up, move the block away, and come back down. Awesome. Once you're here, now walk your feet a little farther away, bring them a little farther apart. Let your arms rest wherever they're comfortable and just windshield wiper your knees from side to side. And this can be a nice big movement. We're not trying to hold anything still, we're just moving side to side. Right. Come on back to feet on the floor, knees bent. And then without the strap this time, we're going to lift one leg up. And now from here, we're going to add a bit of external rotation. So you're turning your toes out to the side. Then bend your knee and cross your knee over your ankle over your knee. And if it lands out here and you have to kind of pull it in, rather than making any of these adjustments to get your ankle over your knee, walk the other knee farther away. Okay? So wherever you are, stay right here. And if this feels like a great stretch for your hip, stay as you are. If you want a little bit more, pick the other foot up off of the ground and hold on to the back of this leg with hands, or again with hands and strap. Whatever suits you better. All right, and you should be getting some nice stretch sensation on the side of your hip. Just breathe here. And just like we were deliberately breathing down to our belly at the beginning of the class, imagine that you could breathe right down to the area where you feel the stretch. Just picturing as if you could draw some softness down, some softening. Just inviting some of these muscles to let go, even if it's just a little bit. And you can let this one go when you're ready. This is a nice one you can come back to anytime if you want a bit of a stretch. You might want to spend more time there on your own. But for now, we'll do the other side. So lifting the other leg up, adding some external rotation. From there, bend your knee, cross ankle over knee, make adjustments if you need to so that you don't have to be yanking your leg around to find this position. And then stay here if this suits you. Bring the other leg in if that feels good for you. And again, breathe. Breathe easy. Breathe in softness. Imagine you could breathe right down to your hip. Inviting in some softening, some letting go. Let's see. One more breath here. And then unravel your legs, feet back down to the ground, and then take any kind of movement or stretch you'd like. You can stretch long, you can bring your knees in, do any kind of little movements. All right. And then roll over to your side. And now we're going to come to laying on our belly. And we'll do another movement that involves some rotation of the hips. Before we do, though, let's just do a nice little stretch for our back. So bring your hands to the ground beside your shoulders. Your head can just rest on the ground like this. And just lift it up a bit so I can talk to you a bit more. And from here, roll your shoulders up and back. Nice. Keep that. And then imagine you could press your tailbone as if you had a tail down towards your heels. And from there, peel your head and your chest up away from the ground. Get a bit of a stretch here. It doesn't have to be big, it could just be coming right here, whatever you'd like. And then come on back down. Rest your head on your hands, or if you've got a pillow or anything else nearby to help you feel more comfortable here, get that in place. And then just wiggle your hips from side to side a few times. All right, come on back to stillness. Lift one leg up and reach it back and set it back down. Same thing with the other leg. Lift up, reach back, set it down, and then bend both of your knees, letting your feet face up towards the ceiling. And now all we're going to do here is let the legs pull it to the sides and come back into the center. So this is rotation, just doing it in a different position. It's a really nice way to get some internal rotation at the hips. So if you let your feet fall out to the side, you're internally rotating your at the hip joints. And if this feels good, if it's a nice stretch, you can just stay here for a few breaths. Another thing you can try is do this one leg at a time. You can move the leg out, you can move the leg in, and just go back and forth. You can let your pelvis kind of move a little bit with this motion as well. Kind of using the leg as a bit of a lever to encourage some movement of your pelvis. And you might find that that gives you a little bit of a stretch, a little bit of a massage of the back. All right. And if you're doing one leg at a time, let's switch to the other leg. That one a little bit of attention. You might notice that one leg moves totally differently than the other, and that's fine. That's just information. Just notice. All right, let that go. Take a moment. When you're ready, come up to hands and knees. And then we'll take, resting pose here. It's called child's pose, and it doesn't work for everyone. So try it out. One version of it is you take your knees out to the sides, you bring your toes closer to each other. You sit your hips back, you reach your arms forward, and you bring your head down towards the ground. This is a big movement at the hips, though. So if that doesn't work for you, the alternative is to keep your hips kind of over your knees, but reach your arms forward like this. And just let your head drop down. So whichever version, or you can just rest some other way if you'd like. It's up to you. And let that go. So we're going to finish the class with a resting pose. In yoga classes, we often call it Shavasana, the final resting pose of the class. So traditionally, what we do is just lay on our back on our mat, but that's up to you if you feel comfortable in that position or not. You can take any position. You can lay on your belly, you can lay on your side. What I really like to do is use a strap around the knees, just like we started off with at the beginning of the class. So I'm going to set myself up this way, but you can just take a moment to find any comfortable position. You can even sit if you want. It really doesn't matter which shape you're in. The point is to just rest for just a couple minutes to finish the class. So when you've found a comfortable position, just settle in here. And just notice all of the parts of your body that are touching the ground or the chair, wherever you're resting. And then we're going to do nothing on purpose. We're just going to do full nothingness resting. So just allow your body to begin to feel a little bit more heavy. Allow the surface you're resting on, the ground or the chair, wherever you are, to just do all of the work of supporting your body. And as you breathe here, picture a little bit more of a sense of heaviness, a sense of letting go with each exhale. As if you could sink down a little bit more deeply into the support of the ground or whatever you're resting on. And I invite you to stay here for a few more minutes, resting just like this. And I will say goodbye to you for now, but stay and rest for as long as you are able to. So I thank you for practicing with me today, and I hope you have found this helpful.